Let's get back to politics. Joining me, Labor member for Parramatta, Andrew Charlton, and Liberal member for Flinders, Zoe McKenzie. I want to play you both a little of what Peter Dutton said, just to recap for our viewers. He says the Prime Minister hasn't handled anti-Semitism and the rise. Things have escalated from the protests to now the risk of terrorism. And he described this caravan bomb filled with explosives as possibly, if it were allowed to be carried out, what would have been the largest terrorist attack in Australian history. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
And are we surprised that these people now, with no red lines, having masqueraded as protesters when really they're just racist bigots who have been protesting on university campuses for months without the Prime Minister doing anything? Should we act surprised that this has escalated now to an attempted terrorist attack? No, we shouldn't. And the Prime Minister needs to show national leadership here to deal with the national crisis, and so far there's been no sign of it.
Andrew, Peter Dutton says Mr Albanese has ignored the threat since the Opera House protest all those months ago. What's your response?
Well, Kieran, first let me say that the potential attack that we saw with those explosives in Dural is absolutely abhorrent. It would appall all Australians, and our thoughts, our prayers, our hearts are with the Jewish community, who should not have to live in fear. In relation to the Prime Minister, I think it's a shame what Peter Dutton is saying and doing. The truth is that the Prime Minister has been strong on this from day one. He has taken a series of actions against to ward off anti-Semitism. He has established Operation Avalite. He has condemned these attacks unequivocally. He has set up an envoy for anti-Semitism. He has banned Nazi salutes. He has legislated on doxing, a whole series of actions that Australia has not seen before. And I think now is the time for Australians to show resolve, for Australians to work together to stamp out anti-Semitism and make sure that the Jewish community in Australia feels as safe as they and every other Australian deserves to feel.
Zoe, the government, like the opposition and others, have condemned these latest examples of anti-Semitism, whether it be the vandalism or this foiled terror attack. With the criticism, does it risk the unity needed to deal with that crisis?
Kieran, almost every move that Andrew just listed were moves that the Prime Minister only took under duress after repeat demands from Peter Dutton. The Anti-Semitism Task Force, the National Cabinet meeting, looking at mandatory sentences for terrorism, passing the laws to ban Nazi salutes and other offensive actions that have been happening on the ground since the 7th of October. For the first year from the 7th of October, the Prime Minister didn't fail to mention anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in the same sentence, as though they were the same things happening at the same incidents. We've seen a 740% increase in anti-Semitic attacks in this country and anti-Semitic behaviour, and the Prime Minister at every single turn has been full of gobbledygook. Take a leaf out of the book of Chris Minns. At least he speaks plainly on this. He spoke plainly last night in his press conference with the New South Wales Police. The Prime Minister must do the same thing. And if you need to know for 1 second what sits at the bottom of Anthony Albanese's position on this, look at what the Treasurer said today on Today. And I will read it out because I don't want to get it wrong. It's so egregious. He said what it shows is that the fears that a lot of Australians in the Jewish community have are not always unfounded. Are you kidding me? Are not always unfounded after what we've seen happen in Sydney in particular over the last 2 months. No, their fears are not always unfounded. Shame on you, Jim Chalmers. Shame on you, Anthony Albanese. More needed to be done. More.
Andrew, the opposition leader says the PM has done this all in part or he hasn't responded more forcefully because of trying to attract votes from the Greens. Well,
in my view, Kieran, that is an outrageous and unfortunate politicisation of an urgent national challenge to come together and address anti-Semitism. This is not a time for us to be scoring political points against each other. This is a time for us to come together as a community and show resolve, determination and strength to stamp out this scourge. That is what Australians want to see. No amount of point scoring against Anthony Albanese or Jim Chalmers makes Australians safer. What makes Australians safer is us coming together with concrete plans and real action to stamp out anti-Semitism and make sure that everybody in Australia feels safe. Australians are appalled by this. This is an abhorrent set of acts that the Jewish community in Australia have faced day after day after day. And what we need now is resolve, strength and unity, not political point scoring.
This was an argument made by Mark Dreyfus, Zoe. He was at the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. He says the politicisation of the issue is grotesque.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just not taking that from a leadership that's failed to act on anti-Semitism since October 7. I listened to Andrew's words, I applaud Andrew's words, I applaud Josh Burns's words, right? That kind of clarity was needed from the beginning. It's all very well 14 months later, after the destruction of childcare centres, synagogues and patent fear on the streets, as well as the threat of the biggest terrorist act in this country. It's all very well to say enough is enough now. I'm sorry, enough is enough on the weekend of October 7. What we saw happen in Sydney then was a sign to this government to be very clear in its language, and it failed to do so, and it failed to do so for a whole year. Until right now, it is plain to every Australian citizen that they have let this get out of hand.
I want to, we're going to have more on this issue. Obviously, the Prime Minister is going to be asked about it shortly in Melbourne. We'll get to that news conference when he gets to that lectern. In the meantime, Andrew, let's change tack. I want to ask you about the inflation number. Will we see a rate cut in a few weeks?
Well, look, certainly we've made really strong progress on inflation. As everybody knows, the Liberals left Australia with very high inflation, with a 6 in front of it. And we have been steadily bringing that inflation rate down. And yesterday we saw another reduction. Now we have headline inflation right in the middle of the RBA's target band, which gives them maximum room to move in terms of bringing interest rates down. Of course, that decision is up to the Independent Reserve Bank, but the government has done the hard work of getting inflation down, which provides the opportunity for interest rate cuts. That's not something that was done easily. It's certainly not something that was done by the Liberals, and Australians have felt an enormous amount of pain as that inflation rate has been coming down. But I think Australians can now look forward to a period of more normal and moderate inflation and a period in which the RBA has the opportunity to reduce rates, and that should be welcome to all Australians who've been doing it so tough over the last 3 years, trying to get that Liberal inflation down.
Zoe McKenzie, the Liberal inflation. It was certainly more than double what it is now at the at the time of the last election. So there has been a great deal of progress, no?
The average inflation under this government, 4.1. The average inflation under our previous government, 2.2. I welcome this change and I hope it produces results in terms of an interest rate reduction. The average Australian mortgagee is paying $26,000 more every year. It's more like $50,000 in my electorate because of property values. But let's talk about what those figures yesterday revealed in terms of the stuff people don't have to have any choice about buying. Meat up 4%. Veggies up 4.5%, insurance up 6%, school costs up 5%. I was mown down at the Butter manufacturing plant on Monday as people were coming in to get their discount school shoes because, frankly, they have to. Prices are going up left, right and centre in the stuff that's non-negotiable. What we saw yesterday was fuelled by a handout that we're getting in our energy bills, quite frankly, because this government failed in its promise delivered 97 times that they would reduce our energy bills by $275. They've gone up by $1,000 for a household, but this little handout has shown a big drop in electricity prices in the CPI, saving these guys bacon just before an election.
Well, just on that, Andrew, do you see the rate cut shifting? I mean, obviously the economics and the politics, it's all tied together at this time of the cycle, but I'm just wondering psychologically for people, will it say to them, the worst is over, we're going to get a few rate cuts, as you alluded to earlier, that we're going to have a more normalised inflation period coming over the months and the year ahead, Andrew?
Look, I think it will. I mean, Zoe just said that the progress that we've made on inflation is about handouts. That's obviously not true. Both the headline level of inflation has come down, which is affected by the energy rebates that the government has provided. Without some of those rebates, electricity prices would have gone up by 25% in the quarter to December. Instead, they were basically flat. But we have also seen underlying inflation come down from the very high level that the Liberals left us with. So we've been making progress on inflation both by helping people with cost of living measures and by getting that underlying inflation down from the level that the Liberals left us with. I think people are now starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel. It's been a very difficult period as that inflation grinds down from the 6% level that the Liberals left us with, a level that forced the RBA to lift interest rates so many times. But now that Labor has reduced that inflation level back into the target band, most Australians can see that that will allow the RBA to give some welcome relief for families who've been doing it so tough.
And families, businesses, I know, Zoe, you've told us many times about the small businesses in Flinders on the beautiful Mornington Peninsula, and in your seat they've been struggling. So if there are 2, 3, maybe 4 rate cuts over this cycle, that'd be music to the ears.
It certainly would to be for my small businesses, most of whom are backed by the local home loan. But let's not get carried away here, right? Yesterday's core inflation figure was 3.2. The Reserve Bank's target rate is between 2% and 3%. There have been 12 quarters in which they have missed that target rate under this government. There have been 12 increases in interest rates over that time. Prices are still going up. Prices are still going up, people. Just less than they were galloping under this government because they keep priming this economy with cash. Look at what the Prime Minister's done since the beginning of January. $10 billion out the door. Your money. $10 billion. Pump priming the Australian economy and driving inflation. But he's lucky those figures will probably come up after the next election.
Zoe and Andrew, I look forward to seeing you both in the studio next week. Parliament's back. You'll both be in the studio with me. I look forward to that. Catch you then.